My name is Elena Martinez, and at 28 I thought I had finally earned my family's respect. After 6 grueling years, pursuing my doctorate in biomedical engineering, graduation day arrived with a devastating text message that would shatter everything I believed about family loyalty. While I stood in my cap and gown ready to walk across that stage, as the first doctor in our family's history, my parents were 3 states away at my brother's impromptu pool party, celebrating his new gaming setup purchase. What happened next exposed a conspiracy that had been destroying my life for years. Before we dive into this story of family, betrayal, and the sweet justice that followed, I want to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below and smash that like button if you've ever felt overlooked by your own family. Don't forget to subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild and you won't believe how karma came full circle. Trust me, the revenge I served was colder than my parents' hearts. The morning of my graduation started like any other milestone I had achieved alone. I woke up in my tiny studio apartment near the university, staring at my doctoral hood hanging on the closet door. 6 years of research, countless sleepless nights, and a dissertation that could potentially help millions of people with spinal cord injuries. Today was supposed to be the culmination of everything I had worked for since I was 12 years old and declared I would become a doctor. My phone buzzed with what I assumed would be good luck messages from my parents. Instead, I found a group text that made my blood freeze. "Elena, honey, we are so sorry, but we cannot make it to your graduation today. Your brother Dylan called last night and really needs our support. He just bought this amazing new gaming computer and wants to throw a celebration party by the pool. You know how sensitive he gets when we miss his special moments. We will make it up to you later. Congratulations on your degree thing. Love you." I read the message 3 times certain I was misunderstanding something fundamental about reality. My degree thing. 6 years of doctoral work reduced to a degree thing. Meanwhile, my 24-year-old brother, who had dropped out of community college twice and still lived in their basement, was throwing a pool party to celebrate spending their money on electronics. The rational part of my brain tried to make excuses for them. Maybe Dylan was going through something serious. Maybe this party was actually about something more important than gaming equipment. But deep down I knew this was just the latest chapter in a lifelong pattern I had been too naive to recognize. Growing up, every achievement of mine had been overshadowed by Dylan's needs. When I won the state science fair at 15, they missed the ceremony because Dylan had a stomach ache and wanted them home. When I graduated valedictorian from high school, they spent the entire dinner talking about Dylan's latest job interview at a video game store. When I got accepted to graduate school with a full scholarship, they asked if I could delay starting so I could help Dylan move into his new apartment. I had always told myself they just express love differently. Some families are not demonstrative. Some parents show pride quietly. I convinced myself that their absence was not personal, that they supported me in ways I could not see. But standing there in my graduation outfit holding a phone that contained 23 unread messages about Dylan's pool party planning in our family group chat, the truth finally crystallized. This was not about different love languages or busy schedules. This was about priorities, and I had never been one. I scrolled through our family group chat history, suddenly seeing everything with new eyes. Months of conversations about Dylan's job searches, his gaming achievements, his relationship drama, his various attempts at hobbies. Hundreds of messages of encouragement, advice, and emotional support for my brother. When had they last asked about my research? When had they celebrated any of my academic milestones? The answer was devastating. Never. I searched for my name in our chat history. The results were sparse and functional. Reminders about family dinners I was expected to attend. Requests to help with Dylan's expenses because he was going through a tough time. Questions about when I would be done with school and get a real job. Not once had they asked about my research. Not once had they acknowledged that I was pursuing something meaningful. As I sat on my bed in my graduation regalia, I made a discovery that changed everything. I opened my laptop and went to our family's shared Google Photos album. Years of pictures from Dylan's birthday parties, his gaming tournaments, his casual hangouts with friends that somehow warranted parental attendance. But when I searched for photos from my academic achievements, I found almost nothing. My high school graduation photos, Dylan was prominently featured in every shot, making faces at the camera. My undergraduate graduation. They had left early, and there were no pictures of me in my cap and gown. My graduate school acceptance celebration dinner. The photos were entirely of Dylan's food because he had chosen the restaurant. The most damaging discovery came when I found a conversation in my mother's phone from 2 months ago. She had accidentally added me to a group chat with my aunt, and I had never removed myself. The messages were still there, and reading them felt like watching my life through a funhouse mirror. Elena is so serious all the time, my mother had written. She never needs anything from us. Dylan is more sensitive and requires more attention. She will be fine on her own. But what about her graduation? My aunt had responded. That seems like a big deal. Oh, she probably prefers it small anyway. You know how she is with crowds. Besides, Dylan has been planning this party for weeks, and he specifically asked us to be there. We cannot let him down. My aunt had sent back a confused emoji, but my mother had continued. Elena has always been independent. She does not need us the way Dylan does. She will understand. The conversation continued with my mother, explaining how I was naturally self-sufficient while Dylan was going through a rough patch and needs family support. According to her, my success meant I required less love and attention, while his failures meant he deserved more. I screenshot every message, my hands shaking with rage and heartbreak. 28 years of feeling like I was asking for too much when I wanted basic recognition. 28 years of being told I was selfish for wanting my parents at important events. 28 years of watching my brother receive unconditional support while I was expected to earn scraps of approval through perfect behavior and academic achievement. But the final straw came when I discovered something that made my stomach turn. In our family's shared calendar, today's date had an entry: Elena's thing, probably boring. Meanwhile, Dylan's pool party was labeled Dylan's amazing celebration. Must attend. They had not forgotten my graduation. They had actively chosen not to prioritize it. That revelation was the moment everything changed. I was done being the understanding daughter. I was done making excuses for their neglect. I was done pretending that their treatment of me was normal or acceptable. I looked at myself in the mirror, saw the strong, accomplished woman I had become despite their lack of support, and made a decision that would alter our family dynamics forever. They wanted to treat my achievements as optional and my brother's mediocrity as urgent. Fine. But they were about to learn that actions have consequences, and I was done protecting them from the natural results of their choices. The revenge I was about to orchestrate would be methodical, devastating, and absolutely justified. They had taught me that family loyalty was conditional. Now, I was going to teach them what happens when that condition is no longer met. I graduated alone, walking across that stage with a smile that felt carved from ice. My research advisor, Dr. Patricia Blackwood, noticed my family's absence immediately. She had met my parents once during my defense presentation, and their discomfort with my academic achievements had been obvious even then. They had spent the entire reception asking Dylan about his latest gaming purchases via speakerphone. "Elena, where are your parents, doctor?" Blackwood asked after the ceremony, her concern evident. "They had a family emergency," I replied smoothly, the lie tasting bitter but necessary. I was not ready to admit the truth out loud, not yet. But Dr. Blackwood was not fooled. She had been mentoring graduate students for 15 years and had seen every family dynamic imaginable. "Would you like to join my family for dinner tonight? We are celebrating my daughter's engagement, and we would love to have you." The kindness in her voice nearly broke my composure, but I managed to decline gracefully. I needed this evening to think, to plan, to transform my hurt into something more productive than tears. I went home and changed out of my graduation outfit, hanging it carefully in my closet like evidence I might need later. Then I did something I had never done before. I turned off my phone and ignored my family completely. No congratulatory call to Dylan about his party. No check-in text to ask how everything went. No attempt to smooth over their absence or make them feel better about their choice. For the first time in my adult life, I prioritized my own emotional needs over their comfort. I spent that evening researching something that had nothing to do with biomedical engineering. I researched family law, inheritance planning, and the legal rights of adult children. What I discovered was fascinating and would become crucial to my long-term strategy. My parents had always dangled their financial support over both Dylan and me, but in very different ways. For Dylan, money flowed freely with no conditions or expectations. His rent, his car payments, his credit card bills, his various failed business ventures, everything was covered without question. For me, financial support came with strings, expectations, and frequent reminders of their generosity. But here was the interesting part: I had never actually needed their money. My graduate assistantship covered my living expenses, and my research grants had funded everything else. The financial support they provided was minimal and usually came in the form of gifts I had not requested. Meanwhile, Dylan's dependence on them was total and ongoing. I began documenting everything. Every expense they covered for Dylan versus what they had spent on me. Every family event they had prioritized for him versus what they had missed for me. Every excuse they had made, and every pattern that emerged from years of unequal treatment. The picture that developed was striking. Over the past 5 years, they had spent approximately $37,000 on Dylan's various expenses. On me, less than $3,000, and most of that was birthday and Christmas gifts I had not asked for. But the real revelation came when I started examining their social media presence. My mother's Facebook page was a shrine to Dylan's mediocre achievements, pictures of him playing video games with captions about his dedication and focus, posts about his job interviews, calling him ambitious and driven, photos of his pool party from earlier that day with dozens of comments about what a special young man he was. My doctoral graduation not mentioned, not even acknowledged. My father's LinkedIn profile listed Dylan as his connection with a glowing recommendation about his potential in the gaming industry. I was not mentioned anywhere despite having just earned the highest academic degree possible in a field that could literally save lives. This was not accidental oversight. This was deliberate erasure. I created a detailed timeline of every major event in both Dylan's and my adult lives, noting their response to each. The pattern was undeniable and would be crucial evidence for what I was planning. While I was deep in my research, my phone finally buzzed back to life with a flood of messages. The family group chat had exploded with photos and videos from Dylan's pool party. Dozens of messages about what an amazing time everyone had, how proud they were of his success, how lucky they felt to have such a wonderful son. Not one message asked about my graduation. Not one person seemed to remember it had even happened, but the message that pushed me past the point of no return came at 11:30 that night. It was from my mother, sent only to me. "Hope your little ceremony went well today. Dylan's party was absolutely magical. You would have loved it, but I know you prefer quiet celebrations anyway. We will catch up soon. Love you, my little ceremony." 6 years of doctoral work dismissed as a little ceremony. Meanwhile, Dylan's equipment purchase was magical. That was the moment I realized something crucial: they were never going to change. This was not about misunderstanding or poor communication. They had made a conscious choice about which child mattered more, and no amount of achievement on my part was going to alter that calculation. But I was done trying to earn something they were never going to give me. Instead, I was going to make sure they understood exactly what they had lost through their choices. I opened a new document on my laptop and began drafting what I privately called the consequences plan. It had 3 phases: documentation, isolation, and revelation. Each phase was designed to remove me from their lives in a way that would make my absence impossible to ignore or minimize. Phase 1 involved continuing to document their behavior while strategically reducing my availability to them. No more family dinners where I was expected to listen to Dylan's problems. No more financial advice or emotional labor provided free of charge. No more playing the role of the understanding, low-maintenance daughter. Phase 2 would involve gradually removing myself from family events and group communications. Let them explain my absence to relatives. Let them handle Dylan's emotional needs without using me as a backup support system. Phase 3 was the most crucial: a complete revelation of their behavior patterns delivered at a moment when the consequences would be most impactful for them. I had learned something important from my years in research. The most effective interventions are systematic, well-documented, and timed for maximum impact. Emotional reactions create temporary discomfort. Strategic consequences create lasting change. As I finalized my plan, I felt something I had never experienced before when dealing with my family: complete emotional control. For years, I had let their treatment of me determine my self-worth. I had accepted their narrative that I was less important because I was more capable. But sitting there in my apartment, surrounded by the evidence of their systematic neglect, I realized I had been approaching this all wrong. I had been trying to prove I deserved their love and respect. What I should have been doing was deciding whether they deserved mine. The answer to that question was becoming very clear, and it was about to change everything. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange sort of peace. I had stopped responding to the family group chat immediately, instead checking it once daily, like reading a report from a foreign country. The messages continued their predictable pattern. Dylan's minor accomplishments treated like major victories, requests for my advice that went ignored when I did not respond within hours, and casual assumptions about my availability for family obligations. What they did not realize was that I was building a case file. Every screenshot was dated and cataloged. Every expense they covered for Dylan versus me was documented with bank records I could access through our shared family accounts. Every social media post that featured him prominently while erasing me completely was saved with timestamps. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to reach out to extended family members I had been neglecting. My Aunt Rosa, my father's sister, had always seemed to notice the family dynamics more clearly than others. When I called her ostensibly to share my graduation news, her response was illuminating. "Elena, congratulations on your doctorate. I saw the photos your mother posted on Facebook." She paused. "Wait, no, I did not see any photos." "Did she not post about it?" "She might have forgotten," I said carefully. "Forgotten your doctoral graduation?" Aunt Rosa's voice sharpened. "But she posted 47 pictures from Dylan's pool party last weekend." I counted them because it seemed excessive. That conversation opened a floodgate. Aunt Rosa had been noticing the favoritism for years, but had assumed it was not her place to comment. She told me about conversations with my mother where Dylan's needs were always framed as urgent, while mine were considered manageable. "Your mother always says you do not need as much support because you are so capable," Aunt Rosa explained. "But Elena, being capable does not mean you should receive less love. It should mean they are more proud of you, not that they can ignore you." My cousin Marcus, Aunt Rosa's son, had similar observations. He had noticed that family gatherings always revolved around Dylan's latest drama, while my achievements were mentioned briefly and then dismissed. He had assumed this was normal until he started comparing it to how his own parents celebrated his successes. "It is like they trained everyone to see Dylan as the main character, and you as the supporting cast," Marcus said during one of our phone conversations. "But you are the one with actual accomplishments. You are the one making a difference in the world." These conversations were validating, but they also served a strategic purpose. I was building a network of family members who could witness what would eventually unfold. When the time came to reveal the full extent of my parents' favoritism, I would not be alone in my observations. Meanwhile, my absence from family functions was starting to create ripples. I had missed Dylan's birthday dinner, claiming a work obligation. When they planned a family barbecue the following weekend, I was suddenly too busy with post-graduation paperwork. Each absence was met with mild disappointment but quick acceptance, proving my earlier point: my presence was expected but not particularly valued. But Dylan was starting to notice something else. Without me there to serve as his emotional support system, family gatherings were becoming more intense for him. For years I had been the buffer who listened to his complaints, offered advice about his problems, and generally absorbed the emotional labor he required. With me absent, all of that attention-seeking behavior was directed entirely at our parents. According to Marcus, who attended the birthday dinner I had skipped, Dylan spent most of the evening talking about his anxiety, his job search struggles, and his complicated relationships with friends. Without me there to validate his feelings and offer solutions, our parents were left to handle his emotional needs alone. By the end of the night, even they seemed exhausted by the intensity of his demands for attention and support. This was exactly what I had hoped would happen. For years, I had been enabling their dysfunctional family system by making it easier for them to neglect me. I handled Dylan's emotional crises so they did not have to deal with the full extent of his neediness. I managed my own problems independently so they could focus their energy on him. I made their favoritism sustainable by reducing the cost of their choices. But now they were experiencing the true weight of the dynamic they had created. Dylan's neediness had not decreased in my absence. It had simply become their full-time responsibility. And my absence was creating a void they had not expected to feel. The first crack in their facade came 3 weeks after graduation. My mother called me directly for the first time since that devastating text message. "Elena, honey, we miss you at family dinners. Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I replied smoothly. "I have been very busy with job applications and research publication deadlines. Well, we would love to see you soon. Dylan has been asking about you." "Dylan has been asking about me. Yes, he says, family gatherings feel different without you there. He misses talking to you about his problems." There it was. Not that they missed my company or wanted to celebrate my achievements. Dylan missed having his personal therapist available. "I am sure he will be fine," I said. "You and Dad are excellent at supporting him through his challenges." My mother's pause was telling. "Well, yes, but you are so good at talking to him. You understand him in ways we do not." "I am sure you will figure it out," I replied. "I need to go now. I have a job interview to prepare for." A job interview? When did this happen? The fact that she did not know about my job interviews was perfect evidence for my documentation. Here was proof that they had no idea what was happening in my life beyond their own family convenience. "Several places," I said vaguely. "I will let you know how they go," but I would not be letting them know anything. In fact, I had accepted a position at a biomedical research company in Seattle, 3,000 miles away from our hometown in North Carolina. The job was perfect cutting-edge research, excellent salary, and most importantly enough distance to make impromptu family obligations impossible. I had not told them about the job search, the interviews, or the offer. They would learn about my move the same way they learned about everything else in my life after it was already decided and too late to influence. The position started in 6 weeks, which gave me time to execute the final phases of my plan. But first I needed to solidify my support network and ensure that when everything came to light, the truth would be undeniable. I reached out to my graduate advisor, Dr. Blackwood, and shared some of what had been happening. Her response was both supportive and strategically helpful. "Elena, what you are describing is a form of emotional neglect that is unfortunately common in families with high achievers," she said. "Parents sometimes assume that successful children need less support, which creates a terrible cycle. But you should know that your research has already been noticed by some very important people in our field. You are about to have opportunities that will put you in a position of significant influence." She was right. The job offer I had accepted came with the possibility of leading my own research team within 2 years. I would be in a position to mentor young scientists, publish groundbreaking research, and contribute to medical advances that could help millions of people. My parents had missed my graduation to attend a pool party, but they were about to miss something much more significant: the launch of a career that would make me far more successful than they had ever imagined possible. The irony was perfect. They had always treated my achievements as less important than Dylan's needs. Soon my achievements would be public enough that their neglect would be impossible to hide from friends, extended family, and their community. But before I moved across the country and started my new life, there was one final family event I planned to attend. Dylan had announced that he was finally ready to move out of their basement and into his own apartment. The family was planning a celebration dinner to mark this major milestone in his life. I would be there for that dinner, but not to celebrate. I would be there to deliver a revelation that would change our family dynamic forever. Dylan's independence celebration was scheduled for a Saturday evening at the expensive steakhouse where we had celebrated every major event in his life. The same restaurant where my graduate school acceptance had been overshadowed by his failed community college application. The same place where my research grant announcement had been interrupted by his breakup drama. Tonight it would become the venue for a very different kind of milestone. I arrived precisely on time, carrying a professionally wrapped gift that had taken considerable thought to select. My parents greeted me with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for my rare appearances, immediately launching into updates about Dylan's apartment hunting process and how proud they were of his decision to finally become independent at 24. "Elena, we are so glad you could make it," my mother gushed. "Dylan has been so excited to share this news with you. He specifically asked if you would be here tonight." Dylan beamed from across the table, clearly expecting the same supportive audience he had always received for his minimal accomplishments. He spent the first 20 minutes of dinner describing his new studio apartment in detail, emphasizing how he had negotiated the security deposit and handled the application process mostly by himself. Mostly by myself meant our parents had co-signed the lease and paid the first year of rent up front, but I listened with the same polite attention I had perfected over decades of these performances. "And the best part," Dylan continued, "is that I can finally have people over without feeling weird about living at home. I am thinking about throwing a housewarming party next month. Elena, you should definitely come." "That sounds wonderful," I replied smoothly. Speaking of celebrations, I have some news to share as well. The table went quiet with the kind of attention that was rarely directed toward my announcements. I savored the moment, knowing it would be the last time they would ever take my presence for granted. I accepted a position with Meridian Biomedical Research in Seattle. I will be leading a team focused on spinal cord injury recovery research, with potential applications that could help thousands of patients regain mobility. The position comes with a substantial salary and the opportunity to publish research that could change lives. My father was the first to respond. "Seattle, that is very far away. When would this start?" "I start in 3 weeks. I will be moving next weekend." The silence that followed was different from their usual polite disinterest. This was shock, confusion, and the beginning of panic. "3 weeks," my mother repeated. "Elena, this is very sudden. Why did you not tell us you were job hunting? We could have helped you explore options closer to home." "I did not need help," I said, maintaining perfect calm. "I handled the entire process independently, just like I have handled everything else in my life." Dylan looked genuinely confused. "But what about family dinners? What about helping me get settled in my new place? I was counting on you being around for advice and support." That question was the perfect opening for what I had planned to say next. "Dylan, you will be fine without me. You have mom and dad to provide all the support you need, just like they always have." I paused, reaching for the gift I had brought. "Actually, I brought something that might help with this transition." I handed him the wrapped package, which he opened eagerly, while our parents watched with anticipation. Inside was a professional photo album with a cover that read "The Dylan Show, a family production." Dylan flipped through the pages with growing confusion, while our parents leaned in to see what I had created. The album was a comprehensive documentation of our family's 28-year pattern of prioritizing his needs over mine. The first section contained side-by-side comparisons of their social media posts about Dylan's minor accomplishments versus the complete absence of posts about my major achievements. Pages of Facebook screenshots showing dozens of photos from his various parties and celebrations, next to nothing from my academic milestones. The second section documented financial support with bank record excerpts showing the thousands of dollars spent on Dylan's expenses versus the minimal amounts spent on me. Each expense was categorized and totaled, creating an undeniable picture of systematic favoritism. The third section contained a timeline of family events showing every occasion they had missed for me versus every trivial celebration they had attended for Dylan. My high school graduation versus his gaming tournament, my research conference presentation versus his job interview at a pizza shop, my doctoral graduation versus his pool party. The final section was the most damaging: screenshots of private conversations where they discussed their different treatment of us. My mother's messages about me being naturally independent and not needing support. Their calendar entries describing my achievements as boring, while labeling Dylan's activities as must attend. As they flipped through the album, I watched their faces cycle through confusion, recognition, shame, and finally defensiveness. "Elena, this is very hurtful," my father said finally. "We have always tried to give both of you what you needed." "You are right," I replied. "You gave us exactly what you thought we needed." Dylan needed constant support, attention, and financial assistance for every minor challenge. I needed to be ignored, minimized, and expected to handle everything alone because I was too capable to deserve the same treatment. My mother's voice was shaking. That is not fair. We have always been proud of you. Really? Then why is there no evidence of that pride anywhere in your words or actions? Why did you miss my doctoral graduation for Dylan's pool party? Why do your social media accounts look like Dylan is an only child? Why has Dylan received $37,000 in support over 5 years, while I received less than $3,000? Dylan was staring at the album with growing understanding of what it represented. Elena, I did not know they were treating you differently. I thought they were just being supportive. Dylan, you are not the problem, I said, meaning it completely. You asked for support and received it, which is normal. The problem is that I was expected to need nothing while you were allowed to need everything. I stood up from the table, leaving the album open to a page showing their text messages about choosing his party over my graduation. I am moving to Seattle to start a career that will likely make me financially successful enough to never need anything from this family again. I will be working on research that could help thousands of people recover from devastating injuries. I will probably publish papers that get cited in medical journals and possibly win awards for my contributions to science. My parents were staring at me with expressions I had never seen before, a mixture of pride, regret, and dawning realization of what they were losing. And you will read about all of it, the same way you have learned about everything else important in my life after it happens, if at all. Because you taught me that my achievements matter less than Dylan's comfort, and I finally decided to stop fighting that lesson. I picked up my purse and headed toward the exit, leaving behind the family that had never truly seen me and walking toward a future they would never be part of. The last thing I heard was Dylan's voice, shaky and confused. Mom, Dad, is this really how you've been treating her? But I did not stay to hear their answer. I had more important things to do than manage their guilt about the consequences of their own choices. The week following the dinner was a masterclass in the predictable stages of family crisis. My phone exploded with messages ranging from guilt-laden apologies to angry accusations to desperate attempts at manipulation. I read every single one while packing my apartment, documenting each response as further evidence of exactly who they were when their comfortable dynamic was disrupted. My mother's messages started apologetic. Elena, we had no idea you felt this way. We love you so much and never meant to make you feel less important. But when I did not respond immediately, they shifted to defensive. You are being very unfair. We have always done our best with both of you. Dylan needed more help because he struggles more. By day 3, they had moved to accusatory. You are hurting this family with your selfishness. Dylan is devastated and cannot understand why you are abandoning us. My father's approach was more direct and revealed everything I needed to know about his priorities. Elena, you are being dramatic. Yes, we have supported Dylan more financially, but that is because you have always been self-sufficient. We thought you preferred being independent. You cannot punish us for treating you like the capable adult you are. The fact that he framed equal treatment as punishment was perfect evidence for my case file. But the most illuminating messages came from Dylan himself. His initial texts showed genuine confusion and hurt. Elena, I am really sorry about how Mom and Dad have been treating you. I honestly did not realize it was this bad. Can we talk about this? However, as the week progressed and the full impact of my absence became clear, his messages revealed the true nature of his dependence on our family system. Elena, you cannot just leave like this. I need your advice about my new apartment. Mom and Dad are being weird and emotional, and I do not know how to handle it. You are the only one who really understands me. Then, this is really messed up. You are destroying our family over some graduation thing that happened weeks ago. I thought you were bigger than holding grudges. And finally, fine if you want to be selfish and move away, whatever. But do not expect me to keep defending you to Mom and Dad when you are acting like a spoiled brat. That final message was particularly satisfying because it demonstrated exactly how Dylan functioned when his support system was threatened. The moment I stopped providing emotional labor for him, I became the problem rather than his behavior patterns becoming something he needed to address. Meanwhile, extended family members started reaching out as word spread about my move. Aunt Rosa called immediately after hearing from my mother about our family conflict. Elena, your mother is telling people you had some kind of breakdown and made wild accusations about favoritism. But I have been watching this family for years, and everything you told them was true. My cousin Marcus was more direct. I saw that photo album you made. Holy shit, Elena. I mean, I noticed the favoritism, but seeing it documented like that is brutal. Your parents are losing their minds, trying to figure out how to spin this. The most revealing conversation came from my Uncle Robert, my mother's brother who had always been the family peacekeeper. Elena, your mother called me crying about how you blindsided them with accusations, but when I asked her to explain what accusations you made, she could not deny any of them. She just kept saying you should have talked to them privately instead of embarrassing them at dinner. Uncle Robert, I said, I tried talking to them privately for 28 years. They had 3 decades to notice they were treating me differently. I gave them thousands of opportunities to show equal support and pride. They chose not to take any of them. You are right, he admitted. And honestly, watching Dylan these past few years has been concerning. He is 24 and still completely dependent on them for everything. Your parents think they are helping him, but they are actually preventing him from growing up. That observation was more insightful than my uncle probably realized. My parents had created a system where Dylan's failure to launch was rewarded with increased support, while my independence was punished with decreased attention. They had trained him to be helpless and me to be invisible. But the real vindication came when I discovered what was happening in my absence. According to Marcus, who had attended another family dinner, Dylan's emotional demands on our parents had intensified significantly. Without me there to absorb his need for validation and problem solving, he was directing all of that energy toward them. It was exhausting to watch, Marcus told me. Dylan spent 2 hours talking about his anxiety about living alone, his concerns about managing his finances, and his frustration that his friends do not understand him. Your parents looked completely drained by the end of the night. For the first time in their lives, they were experiencing the full cost of the dynamic they had created. Dylan's neediness had not decreased when I stopped enabling it. It had simply become their complete responsibility. And my absence had created a void in their family gatherings that made Dylan's attention-seeking behavior more obvious and overwhelming. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My apartment was packed efficiently, my new job paperwork was completed, and I had scheduled interviews with local news stations about my research. The spinal cord injury recovery work I would be leading had caught attention from medical journals, and I was already being invited to speak at conferences. The contrast was striking. While my family was imploding over their inability to maintain their dysfunctional patterns, without my participation, I was building a life where my achievements would be recognized, valued, and celebrated by people who understood their significance. But the final blow to their comfortable narrative came when Aunt Rosa shared something she had discovered. My mother had been telling friends and extended family that I was going through a difficult phase and had misunderstood their family dynamics. She was framing my move to Seattle as an emotional overreaction rather than a logical consequence of their behavior. However, when Aunt Rosa showed several family members the photo album I had created, their response was immediate and unanimous. My documentation was undeniable proof of systematic favoritism that had been obvious to outside observers for years. Your mother cannot spin this, Aunt Rosa told me. Everyone who sees that album understands exactly what has been happening. Several people have told me they always wondered why your achievements were never mentioned at family gatherings. My parents were learning that their treatment of me had not gone unnoticed by others. Their attempts to rewrite history were failing because the evidence was too comprehensive and the pattern too obvious to deny. As I taped up the final box in my apartment, I realized something profound. I was not losing a family. I was finally free from people who had never functioned as a family for me anyway. The sadness I felt was not for what I was leaving behind, but for what had never actually existed in the first place. Tomorrow, I would start the drive to Seattle and a life where my value would not be determined by how little attention I required. But tonight I was going to celebrate the end of a 28-year experiment in earning love that was never actually available to be earned. 6 months later, I was sitting in my Seattle apartment, preparing for a video call with CNN about my research breakthrough when my phone buzzed with a text from Dylan. It was the first message I had received from any family member in 2 months, and its content was exactly what I had expected. Elena, I know we have not talked in a while, but I really need your advice. I am struggling with living alone, and Mom and Dad are driving me crazy with their hovering. I think I understand now what you meant about the family dynamics. Can we talk? I read the message twice, recognizing the familiar pattern of Dylan, reaching out only when he needed something from me. But this time, I was not the isolated doctoral student, desperate for family connection. I was Dr. Elena Martinez, lead researcher on a groundbreaking study that had just received international attention for its potential to help paralyzed patients regain movement. My life in Seattle had exceeded every expectation. The research team I led was publishing papers that medical professionals around the world were citing. My work was being featured in scientific journals, and I had been invited to present at the International Conference on Spinal Cord Research. Most importantly, I was surrounded by colleagues who celebrated my achievements and understood their significance. Dr. Blackwood had been right about the opportunities that would come with my position. Within 4 months, I had been promoted to senior research director with a salary that made me financially independent in ways I had never imagined possible. But the real transformation was not professional, it was personal. I had built a chosen family of people who valued my mind, respected my accomplishments, and included me in their celebrations. My research partner, Dr. James Chen, had become a close friend who understood the dedication required for our work. My neighbor, Sarah, was a fellow scientist who had also moved across the country to escape family dysfunction. Together, we had created a support network based on mutual respect rather than obligated tolerance. When I did not respond to Dylan's text immediately, he sent another message. Mom says you are probably too busy with your important job to talk to family anymore. But I do not think that is fair. We are still family even if things got weird. That second message revealed everything I needed to know about how my family was processing my absence. They had reframed my boundary setting as me being too important to maintain family relationships rather than acknowledging that they had never offered me family relationships worth maintaining. I screenshot Dylan's messages and added them to the documentation file I had continued maintaining. Not because I planned to use the evidence, but because the pattern was so predictable that it felt like completing a research study on family dysfunction. Then I did something that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. I deleted both messages without responding and went back to preparing for my CNN interview. The interview went perfectly. The journalist Maria Santos was genuinely fascinated by the implications of our research and asked intelligent questions about the potential timeline for clinical trials. When she asked about my background and what had led me to this field, I found myself talking about the importance of perseverance and self-advocacy in ways that felt empowering rather than painful. Dr. Martinez, you seem remarkably focused and driven for someone so young. What keeps you motivated when research progress is slow? I learned early that the only person you can rely on to recognize your value is yourself, I replied. When you stop waiting for external validation and start building something meaningful, you discover capabilities you never knew you had. The interview was scheduled to air the following week, and I knew my family would probably see it. Local news stations often picked up CNN health segments, especially when they featured researchers with connections to their area. For the first time since graduation, they would learn about my life through public media rather than family communication. The irony was perfect. They would discover my success the same way strangers would by watching me discuss achievements that were too significant to ignore or minimize. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the CNN interview was recorded, I received a LinkedIn message from Dr. Patricia Blackwood with a news article attached. Elena, I thought you should see this. Your research is being mentioned in medical journals internationally. You should be incredibly proud of what you have accomplished. The article was from the Journal of Neurological Recovery, and it featured a section about promising young researchers whose work could change the field. My name was listed alongside scientists with decades more experience, and the description of our spinal cord research was both accurate and flattering. More importantly, the article had been shared hundreds of times on social media by medical professionals who understood its significance. Comments from doctors, researchers, and patients expressed excitement about the potential applications of our work. These were people who valued scientific achievement and understood what it meant to contribute to medical advancement. Reading those comments, I realized something profound. I had been seeking recognition from the wrong audience for my entire life. My family's inability to appreciate my achievements was not a reflection of their insignificance. It was a reflection of their limited capacity to understand anything beyond their own immediate concerns. The people whose opinions actually mattered in my field were not only recognizing my work, they were excited about its potential to help patients. That recognition felt more meaningful than 28 years of family approval could ever have been. That evening, I made a decision that felt both final and liberating. I blocked my family's phone numbers, removed them from all social media connections, and changed my emergency contacts to reflect the people who were actually present in my life. I was not doing this out of anger anymore. I was doing it out of clarity. They had taught me that family relationships were conditional on my willingness to accept less than I deserved. I had finally learned to stop accepting that condition. 6 months of distance had shown me what healthy relationships looked like. People who celebrated my successes instead of minimizing them. People who offered support during challenges instead of expecting me to handle everything alone. People who valued my presence instead of taking it for granted. As I submitted the final paperwork to legally change my emergency contacts, I thought about Dylan's message, asking if we could talk. The answer was simple. We had been talking for 24 years, and he had never actually listened. Why would this time be different? I had spent decades trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I was less important than Dylan's comfort. Now, I was building a life where my importance was not debatable because it was based on actual contributions rather than family politics. The story I had been telling myself about family loyalty and unconditional love had been beautiful but false. The real story was about learning to recognize my own value and surrounding myself with people who could see it too. That night, I called Dr. Chen to discuss our next research proposal, then had dinner with Sarah while we planned a weekend hiking trip. These were people who knew my achievements, celebrated my successes, and included me in their lives because they genuinely enjoyed my company. For the first time in my life, I was not the supporting character in someone else's story. I was the protagonist in my own, and it was a much better story than the one I had been living before. Have you ever had to choose between family, loyalty, and self-respect? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how you handled situations where family members took your efforts for granted. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about setting boundaries and finding your worth. Share this with anyone who has ever felt overlooked by the people who should value them most. Thank you for listening to my journey from family scapegoat to scientific success, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who refuse to see your value. Your achievements matter, your feelings are valid, and you deserve relationships that celebrate who you are rather than minimize what you accomplish.